Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Forgiven podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Logan. Sorry, it's been a little while. Life gets busy. Anyway, today I have with me a very special guest, somebody who I have gotten to see grow up a little bit in ministry, not as much as I would like because God moved us in different directions. But I am very happy to have on our special guest,
Charis Israelson. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I'm coming to you from Saskatoon. I'm actually in the district office. I'm in my dad's office.
I was going to say that looks strikingly familiar to your dad's office.
Yeah, I was like, that'd be so funny. My parents are on a mission trip right now, actually. So I thought it'd be funny if I broke in and did it from here instead of from home.
I'm sure by break in, you just asked, hey, can I get in?
I actually just took the keys from the house because where they are, they're asleep. So, but
okay.
I use the office for other things. I took a class over Zoom, and so there's an office right next to my dad's that I used for like a whole semester.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, statute of limitations, I guess, you might get in trouble from your parents if they happen to watch this, but what they don't know, they don't know. So.
Well, I'll probably repost it, and then they'll watch it.
Okay,
so.
Well, and actually, just speaking of that, put a bug in your dad's ear because I would love to get him on. You know, if you put in a little good word for me, you know, because I think he would do it. But enough about that. Charis, how did we meet? Let's let the listeners in on a little bit of that, because the reason that I kind of it's not that I chose you specifically, but the reason that you came to mind to do this podcast was because I was your youth leader for a little bit, for like a year, I guess. I was like your youth pastor, and we think we kind of connected a little bit. But then you started volunteering at the neighborhood where I was, and that's where we like really sort of connected. And then I happened to move away, and I didn't get to foster that relationship. But just from your end, how did we meet? Am I right in that, or is my brain wrong?
No, I think you're right. We might have crossed paths at camp. I don't know how much you were around Living Waters, right? But I was a kid, and I honestly wouldn't remember you from that all that much.
Fair enough.
I was 16 when we moved to Saskatoon.
Oh.
So we moved to Saskatoon, and I started coming to youth group, and you were one of the youth leaders or involved in leadership in some way. And then probably it didn't take very long for me to start serving in Kidsmen, and then on the worship team under Joel. I saw you had Joel on the podcast too.
I did.
The episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both Pastor Ethan and Pastor Joel were very influential at that point in time. In my life. And so, and then I think we started connecting a little bit more as I finished youth. Because youth also, I moved in 2019, fall of 2019, and then 2020, of course, COVID hit, and youth kind of shut down, and yada, 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 all of the things that we don't need to get into. But, that probably would have been... And when did you move? When did you move to Manitoba?
See, I always get this wrong. I always forget because I technically graduated 2020, but we didn't. It had to have been 2021 because I moved basically like right after we had our ceremony, and our ceremony was on Zoom, which was less than ideal. But understand the world had to be the way it was. So yeah, probably 2021 was like fall of 2021 was when I moved away.
Yeah.
Back home, yeah.
Okay, so that would have been shortly after I graduated.
Because I remember doing your grad. Like, I remember doing the grad banquet.
Yes.
Because we had to do a hybrid one because some of you guys got sick and couldn't come. So Ethan and I built, like, little robot structures and we put, like, our cell phones as faces so they could, like, zoom in. So we could still, like, honor them. Yeah. That was, like, the last big project I did there was that.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think I realized that was right when you graduated as well. And then I remember when you left, I remember having a conversation with you, like the last day I saw you.
I know.
You like spoke like affirmation over my calling, which was so cool.
Because I still feel it to be true. And I was hoping to get into that.
Yeah. So that that is from what I remember, our history.
Yes. Well, and so I will say, like, little thing behind the ears. So we talked about Pastor Joel. He's one of my closest friends to this day. He moved on. He went on and got called to somewhere else, which is fine. I then I stepped into a role that was his that I had no business doing by any means, because I just did it because it was a role that needed to be filled. It was an interim worship director. I don't know anything about anything worship related in that way. I am the furthest from it, but I'm a really good tech person. I'm a good sound guy. I can listen and I can do stuff like that. So I started doing it. And so I remember like working with you in that capacity, and actually more working with like your entire family. And this is something that like I have as a question, and I want to just like jump into it right now. Yeah. Your like entire family is musical. Yeah. Or like is, and I think that that is so special, because I can remember one of the last times that I was at the neighborhood church on a Sunday, your entire family like led worship, like your mom, your dad, you, I think your brother Noah was on drums, I think. Yeah. And I was like, whoa. And I'm pretty sure I had Matt in the back with me teaching him something. So I was like, it was like the entire family. And I just want to know, like, is that as special as it is for the audience? Like for you guys doing it?
I would say, yeah. Like, honestly, okay, I didn't realize that wasn't normal. I need you to understand that, like, I was 15 years old, and I just, like, you know, kind of started dating, and, like, my mom's side of the family especially is very musical, and at Christmas we, like, do music. And not just, like, sing carols, but, like, you know, playing instruments and that kind of thing, yeah. Right? And I brought my boyfriend at the time with me, and he was like, this is insane. Like, this is absolutely crazy. But it's what I grew up with. And for me, it's the dream, right? There is nothing that bonds you with people in the same way that music does. Like, not that other things don't bond you to the same depth, but music is just so special. And for our family, like, there's nothing that I think is more unique about our family than that. And all of us are musical. So Noah, like, we all sing.
Yeah.
My older brother, Noah, he plays drums. He can play piano. He stopped when he was like 10. So he didn't quite go as far as I did in that way. Matthew plays the trombone. Oh, I forgot Noah's other instruments. Noah plays trumpet and French horn as well, although he hasn't played those in a while, so he would say he's pretty rusty.
Gotcha.
Matthew played a little bit of guitar, a little bit of piano. He played trombone for a bit. I think he's still waiting to figure out exactly which one is his instrument, if you will.
Yeah. And
then I play piano. I play a tiny bit of guitar. I can play the key of G, which is the easiest key.
That's more than I can do, so...
And I played clarinet and oboe in band.
Okay.
Yeah. I only played oboe for a year. It's quite a difficult instrument, and when we moved, I wanted to play an instrument that I was comfortable with.
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, and then Janae plays clarinet and piano a little bit, and then my dad plays guitar and piano. He's played drums, and he plays bass. And then Mom played clarinet in high school, so she hasn't played since before I was born.
Sure.
But then she's a phenomenal keyboard piano player.
Absolutely. Like, having like done sound and made recordings, like, very, very gifted piano player. And like, I don't know much about it. I can just, from a sound person's perspective, there's just something different about it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. Very gifted. And you yourself are like that as well. And I'm not just like gassing up your mom without telling you, you're also like that as well. Because I'll be honest, I've done sound for a lot of worship bands and a lot of different teams over the years. And this is going to sound mean, but it's not. You can tell that some have way more practice and way more time and energy and passion into something than others. Mm-hmm. And that translates really well with your family. It's like, you can tell that is like just like an actual passion of yours, and it relates to us in the audience who are listening, and it makes it that much more authentic. So yeah. just wanted to lay that out, because I think that that's really special, because you say it's normal. That was something that you only experienced. Completely abnormal for me. So I just wanted to give the listeners a little bit insight into that, because I think it is just really special that way. I don't know of a lot of people that get to do that.
Yeah, and it's like it's so cool when you like because of course your voices all meld really well because
Mm.
you all sound the same. You have the same genetics, right? And uh, and when it comes together, it's very natural. And Dad's a great worship leader. He threw me in the deep end when it came to leading worship for sure. He was just like, "You're gonna lead your first song and play piano for the first time at the same time at church."
Typical
While we
dad.
have guests, while we have guest
Oh,
pastors, and I was like,
oh,
"Yay!"
that's wild. I
Anyway,
like.
but there's lots of nonverbal communication that can happen, right? Which is so cool.
Okay, I have to plug this because I was so moved by it. Last week on Mondays we do like ministry training. So like
Mhm.
I'm usually here till like 9, 10 o'clock at night because we do like hands-on ministry training, whether it's building props for Kidsmen or I teach a media class. So this very podcast they have often edited, and I teach them along the way. And so I don't go home, and so I'll take an hour or two and eat supper and relax. And I was watching YouTube, and I found this video from Passion, like from Passion 2025, and it was from the keyboard player. I don't remember her name right off the top of my head, but I randomly stumbled across it. It was like kind of like I don't know if you've come across those like music director videos or anything like that on
Yeah,
Instagram
yeah.
where you can like hear the click and so she did that while she's like directing the band. And this is like Cody Carnes and like Carrie Job. Like she's like leading, she's like playing along with like some of the like best of the best worship leaders of this era. And I was like paying attention and learning because I don't do that kind of stuff. And I was like jaw dropped, like genuinely watching with my jaw dropped at the non-verbal communication that is like happening between them. Like one of
Hmm.
the guitar players just like lifted his leg and it looked so like just nonchalant. It looks so like out of like completely normal, but she looks over and sees it and then starts changing like the key they're in because that was a sign to transition into the next song.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, I was mind blowing into that. So when you talk about nonverbal communication, it just like I had something to share on that. It was really cool
Yeah.
because I don't know. I find this stuff really interesting because I can't do it, but it helps me become a better sound guy and a better production person when I can learn how people on stage actually think.
Hmm. And I think things like click tracks and music directors and these kinds of things, like they're very popular right now. I've never used them.
Hmm.
It's not something that I'm even necessarily wanting to use.
Okay,
I
fair
think in
enough.
some ways a music director would be helpful, but in other ways, I think it would be distracting. And so I can't fully speak to it because I've never even attempted, right?
Okay.
But
Well, I
uh,
was gonna say. Sorry, go on.
no, please.
What I was gonna say was we like I'm not a worship person around here. That's Pastor Glenn, but we made like the shift this past 2024. We like decided to try like multi tracks and everything for like a full year. Not just like having like a click, but actually being able to add other sounds, right? Like, oh, we don't have an electric guitarist this week. We can have a track. And as a sound person, drooling at the mouth, right? Because you can just make so much more happen. But I'll be honest, it was a lot of like turmoil at the very beginning for the worship leaders trying to like figure it out and like work with it. And it was just very interesting, like to think about that because again, that's that flip side of like I'm trying to learn the stage perspective, but then it's like you get your own bias in it, and of course everybody wants to produce the best quality possible, and it's just interesting how like some worship leaders like picked it up like that and some didn't,
Mhm.
but unanimously almost at the end of the year we're all like, okay, are we gonna do this again? And it was almost a like, yeah, we probably have to, but we're gonna try it again for a while without it and see if we like really like it. And it's just interesting because I don't think a lot of people listening to this, they're not pastors, they're not church leaders like yourself. I don't think they fully understand all of the little tiny like details that go into like preparing for like a Sunday, like a click track versus no click track.
Mhm.
And so I think it's very insightful. And you know what? Try it someday. You might like it, you might not. I have no idea. I don't know. That's my piece of advice. Unsolicited worship pastor advice from somebody who
I
has
love
no
it.
right giving it.
I've had a couple conversations, like Elam uses click tracks and that kind of thing. And I had a conversation with one of their drummers once, and he was like, in some ways it's nice, but in some ways it's
Yep.
very distracting um, when you're on the team especially in a position like the drummer. I think that would be quite complicated, right? So I think there's pros and cons to it for sure. And yeah, I'm hesitant to embrace it, is what I'll say. But
Hey, you know what? Totally fine, right? Like there's no problem in that. I just like to start the conversation like that because it's just interesting that like worship has come a long way in the last even 10 years. And so as I already did a podcast on this already. I can't keep it's just one of my favorite topics. It's so easy for me to slip into it. No, but I want to ask you, what led you to ministry, if that is even your goal at the end? And what led you to Horizon? Kind of a two-part question.
sure. Well, I'm a pastor's kid. Of course, I've been a pastor's kid since the day I was born. So we've been at three different cities, right? So Regina, Swift Current, and Saskatoon. And I'll start with Horizon because my parents always encouraged us to take at least a year of Bible college. Kind of, get your feet under you, make your faith your own, kind of take some time to do that before you enter into very secular spaces like university, right?
Yep.
And I think that was a very wise thing for them to say. And so the plan for me was always to go to Horizon because, it was close enough to home. We lived in Swift Current, right? And like I knew some of the people who attended, and I knew some of the people who were on staff, and it just kind of made sense in that way. But then we moved. We moved when I was 16, and I was livid. I was so mad because my whole life was over and ruined forever.
Very typical response of a 16-year-old girl, by the way. Like, don't.
Exactly. And so I had a little bit of a rebellion when we first moved, where I was like, you know what? I don't want people to know my dad. I want to go somewhere where nobody knows my dad and nobody knows who I am, and I can just be me and be known for who I am and not for who my father is or my brother or whoever happened to be connected to the school at the time. But the move was hard. It was brutal for me. And COVID hit very shortly after, like within 6 months. And by the time I graduated high school, it was 2021. And so COVID was kind of on its way out, but I just finally felt like I put down roots here. And like I was finding community and figuring out where I belonged, and I wasn't ready to uproot myself again and to move across the country. I was going to go to Summit in Abbotsford, BC.
Okay.
So my big rebellion was not Horizon.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Abbotsford either. Nothing wrong with Summit. I know actually a couple people that have gone there.
Yeah. Yeah, great things. Like they're both PAOC affiliated schools. They're both full of wonderful people. I am glad that I stayed. I really, really love the staff. And so I entered Horizon and I took a 1-year degree because I wanted to do the missions trip. So there is a global discipleship certificate that you can take, and you take a month and you go to Panama. And I wanted to do that, so I took a 1-year, thinking I was just going to switch it over to a 4-year because your 1 year has all of the same basic classes as any of the 4-year degrees. And I got to the end of my first year, and I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I can't do ministry. My life is a mess. I feel like a mess. I need to, and I had gone to camp too, and camp was very challenging. And I was like, I can't do this. But I wasn't done with Horizon, so I switched to a 2+1. So I had another year at Horizon, and then I was going to go to Edwards School of Business at the U of S. And probably end up in administration or finance because I can do those things, and my mom does finance, and I thought, how hard could it be? I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yep.
And we got to the end of my second year, and life kind of got flipped on its head again, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna travel for a bit, and I'm going to just take some time to figure out who I want to be and who I'm being called to be. And so I finally was 2 feet in with this whole ministry thing last October, probably. Because I was in Europe. I was traveling with my best friend, love her to pieces, and it was so fun. And we'd been traveling for 3 weeks at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a total of 3.5 weeks. So I'm almost done this trip, and I've been to all of these beautiful churches, um, and we're on the train and not driving, training.
Sure, on the train, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Traveling from Berlin, Germany to Paris, France. And so we're in France and, driving by all these little tiny French towns and you daydream and I'm listening to Taylor Swift,
Nice.
you do. And I'm thinking about all of my like possible lives that I could live in these little towns, right? Because what else do you do to keep yourself entertained?
Yep.
And in that town, I own the bakery, and in that town, I'm a farmer's wife, or I'm a farmer myself, and I'm finding myself in every single one of these little imaginary lives, thinking about the church, and of course I would serve at the church also while I'm doing any one of these lives. And I'm talking to the Lord, and I was like, okay, Lord, whichever one of these thousands of lifetimes that you have for me, because I could live 1,000 lifetimes and I would never see enough or do enough or love enough people. Whichever one of these lifetimes you have for me, I'm going to be satisfied. And then I was like, I'm so sorry, Lord, I just lied to you. I'm not being honest with you at all. The only thing that I actually want, and I could do bivocational, but the only thing that I want is to be part of your church. I love the church with all of me. And I take my earbuds out and I look at Eliza and I was like, I think I'm called to vocational ministry. And she looks at me like I'm an idiot. And she's like, Charis, I know you're called to vocational ministry. You have not shut up about the church since we started this trip 3 weeks ago. I was like, okay, fair enough. And so I came home and I switched my program for the second time, and I'm in a Bachelor of Theology in Ministry Leadership.
Look, hand up. I also said you were called to ministry, by the way. Want that on the record. Just gotta, no. Isn't it amazing how God can take something even so mundane as just sitting on a train and just like completely magnify like his goodness and his presence and everything in that, right? Like I think that that's so amazing in that way. And why not like find yourself in like such a unique experience and seeing God work, right? Like I don't like, and think about now like I found that as I've done full-time ministry now for 5-6 years now, that like the more world you experience, the more life you live, the better you are as a pastor. And that's not to say that somebody who goes right out of Bible college and gets the job and then just does, kind of grinds their way around isn't effective. It's just that like the more life experiences you share and the more times that you get to see God impact your life, the more you get to share and the more you get to help others experience that. So like getting to travel for 3 weeks, I'm sure there's plenty of other amazing stories in there that you will eventually be able to like use in ministry. And that goes for anybody listening, whether you're a pastor or not. God gives you, he reveals himself to you each and every day. And it falls on us if we choose to see that. And in that moment, you chose to see that. And of course, the Holy Spirit works through Eliza and works through you to kind of anoint that moment. But I just want to encourage people listening too that like, you don't have to be sitting on a train. You could be walking to work or going for a walk, like whatever. God can speak to you in whatever way. And it's up to us if we allow him to speak to us, because it's not the other way around. The line of communication is always open from God. It's always us who don't hear him. And I don't think enough people think about that. That story is very encouraging.
Yeah. And I think it takes the space and the silence, right? Like most of the times that I really feel like I've heard the Lord, have been when I'm driving or like when I'm like showering, or there's nothing else that's that's bringing noise or extra things into my world, right? And when it can just be me and the Lord, those are moments of great opportunity for intimacy.
So, what I learned that lesson way too late. Alyssa, like Pastor Ethan's wife,
Yeah.
she and I are great friends. And she was on the mission trip that Ethan and I got to do when we went to Montreal.
Yeah.
Your brother got to go on that one, I think, didn't he? I don't remember.
Did he?
No, maybe he
I
didn't. You
was
guys had,
supposed to. I was
yeah.
supposed to go to Montreal when we moved, but then COVID, so it got
Right.
canceled.
This would have been right before you moved then, like the summer
Yeah.
before you moved. Anyway, we're on this trip and Alyssa's doing all of the devotions. And her whole thing was like hearing from God. And what she did was like honestly, it was mind-blowing to me. And I'm the intern, I'm the pastor's intern. I should know these things already, but I don't. And she's talking about silence. And like every day, she made all of us, sweaty, grumpy team members sit in silence together for like, she started with like 30 seconds and then a minute and then like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. And then by like the third or fourth night, it's kind of like at camp. It was almost like an unofficial Holy Spirit night. I don't know if Living Waters has that, but at our camp down here, generally we kind of have one night where we like dedicate it to like really like pouring into like that area. It's usually like the altar call night and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an unofficial one, I guess. And we like sat in silence for like 5 minutes. And like these are youth, these are teenagers. They don't know what they're doing. Their minds are going a mile a minute. They're thinking about their phone buzzing in their pocket because of all the Snapchats they're getting and different stuff. But slowly practicing it throughout the week, there was like amazing things that happened that night. Not just from like the students, but from myself or from everybody involved, because we finally like took that time to like sit in silence and just allow God to like actually speak to us. So I just wanted to say like it's an incredible moment for those listening. Do it. Take my advice, take Charis's advice, and do it because it's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Silence is a spiritual discipline that we don't talk about enough in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So
because we're so uncomfortable, and especially like as we're gonna get on one of my hobby horses, but with live streaming, right? Or these like it's very when it's entertainment centered, right? Like we don't want to call it entertainment centered, but when we're worried about how much time it takes for the pastor to get on stage after the worship team finishes because we can't have dead space, right? Then like we are so uncomfortable with silence and we're so bored. Because if my YouTube video, if there's 30 seconds, the 30 seconds it would take for somebody to walk up on stage in silence, I'm probably going to close the app, right? Like it's just, we're so impatient and so uncomfortable. And I'm really interested to see how live streaming continues to impact that actually in the church.
See, I don't feel condemned, but I feel called out a little bit because as the person who does that, like that's my job is like producing the live stream. And I mean, you got to work with me just a little bit in that area of like, yeah, like that's one of the things that like, you're right. And it comes exactly from what you're talking about of like, people call it TikTok brain now. I just call it goldfish brain, where it's just like this idea that like we can't go more than 30 seconds without like stimulation or you forget it. And so, yeah, like with our live stream, we just did one this past Sunday. It was like I was in the room and my director's like doing it and the worship leader goes to like change the next pad sound on the iPad or move the music stand lyrics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, the other worship leader's got her mic up and it's kind of just like standing there, cut to her. Like, let's put something interesting on instead of allowing this worshipful moment to be distracted by somebody walking out of the way to go press buttons, on it. So I see it two sides of like, and of course, I would like to dive into this a little bit more now because this is like a very interesting topic because I agree with you completely. And so it's like we have to find that right balance of like letting space for the Holy Spirit to move in those moments of silence, but while also still trying to like make sure that we are reaching an effective audience. And you have to be quick with that online, and that's like the catch-22, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm in a few classes right now, so I'm in Bible college and I think I know everything. But
wait, you too? You also?
Yeah, crazy. I know. I actually, in my second year, it was really bad. I was like, I'm gonna fix the church.
Oh, trust me, girl. I went through that same phase. You'll have to ask. Ethan says that I wasn't that bad. I was that bad. I know for a fact I was that bad. Like, I was correcting him on everything and just thinking that I know better and all this kind of stuff. So, like, it's true. It just happens. It's a stage of learning. It really
Well, I
is.
think it's important. I think it's, it's like when a teenager realizes their parents are like human beings, and you're like,
Yeah.
you're doing that thing that you always do, right?
Yeah.
And oh, actually, that's kind of passive aggressive, mom, right? It's like it's part of that growing up in
Absolutely.
your faith, right? So, but yeah, things like live streaming, or I'm in an interesting class right now. It's technologies and communications in ministry,
Yeah.
um, with Dale Dirksen. I love Dale Dirksen, by the way. Very interesting.
See, Kate, hang on. Just pause. I got to rant for 1 second. I'm even repping my Horizon, like, water bottle.
Nice.
I
I
compl-
noticed that.
Well, the frame changed. I had to zoom in. I intentionally staged it to be there on purpose. But no, okay, I just have to rant really quick. Dr. Martini, I know you listen to this podcast sometimes. I know you do because we've had you on a couple times and he's mentioned things to me before. How come I was there for 4 years and I vehemently complained that was like, there is nothing for modern ministry. I was like, there's no tech classes, there's no nothing. I was like, theology's great, history great, but I was like, when am I going to learn some like actual applicable things to like what I want to do in ministry? And he just kind of smiled and he's like, you're right. And then a year later, the year after I graduate, they roll out this whole new program, and I was like, of course, it's the year after I'm gone that they like get all these like good fun classes and everything like that. Anyway, continue your story. I say that jokingly.
No, but that's so fair. But things like that actually did change how we do school. So I do take classes like tech and communications. Today we looked at soundboards and how do you
Okay.
set up a soundboard, um, which was good and valuable and uncomfortable. Tech is so uncomfortable for me, so it's a
Really?
good thing that I'm taking the class.
Okay.
Uh,
Can I ask, like, what did you learn today then? Let's timestamp this. Like, like, if it's like, let's be real. Why is it afraid? Why are you so afraid of tech? And then what did you learn today that helped you maybe overcome that?
sure. Well, I don't like feeling like I don't know what I'm doing.
Fair enough.
And when I do something, I want to fully understand it, right? So I love my piano because I fully understand how a piano works and I understand music theory.
Gotcha.
But things like the soundboard, I can turn it on. I
Yeah.
appreciate that we have them, and I can probably adjust some levels, and I'm learning things like EQ.
Hmm.
And that's probably the limit of my knowledge. I can probably figure out how to plug in the right things into the right spots. But like you asked me to tell you about what we learned today. And the most interesting things to me were the things that he said were really advanced and not that helpful. And I was like, I
Wow.
like theory. Awesome. So things
That
like how the acoustics sound in a room and how do you measure that, and he like had this whole graph for us
Yep.
of actually the Forest Grove room, the Forest Grove
I've
auditorium.
the spectrograph. It'll.
Yeah,
Yep.
super interesting. I loved that.
It's cool.
But things like this thing is called this wire is called a whatever wire.
Sure.
And you plug it into the three-prong thing, and that's how I think of tech is the thinger
Hmm.
and the majiggy and the
Hmm. Yeah.
that's that's my language for
Hey,
it.
I will say this. You already have a more basic, like, you already have a deeper understanding of like that than like 90% of the population. 90% of the normal population wouldn't even know how to turn it on, wouldn't use the proper terminology like adjusting levels, and then also has no idea what EQ is. They're going to think it's something like intelligence.
Hmm.
So don't be so hard on yourself.
Thank you. I
uh,
appreciate that.
and look, it's not for everybody, okay?
Hmm.
I felt in a passion for it because of church, because I started serving and I was able to do that. But
Yeah.
it seems like you have a passion for music and a passion for that, and so like that's the amazing thing about church and ministry. This is a Pastor John quote. Okay, ministry and church is like a football team. There is a position for everybody.
Hmm. That is a very Pastor John quote.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, but there's so much truth in it. It is
Mhm.
true. It's like, and I say this all the time on the podcast. There is a place for you to serve in your church. Doesn't matter if you want to greet, make coffee, walk the floors, find that spot, no matter what it is, and just start serving, and your life will grow from it. But enough about the taggy stuff. Unless you want to keep going on it, I was just
I'm
curious that like, yeah, I was gonna say. But
good.
my question for you is like, you're gonna graduate this year, right?
Yeah. No, actually, I graduate next year
Next
because
year,
I traveled and whatever else. My
right?
4-year program is now 5 years.
You know what?
So
But what I was gonna say is like, so do you have to do a full 8-month internship somewhere?
yeah, yeah,
Do
I
you
do.
have an idea of what that's gonna look like, or where it? You don't have to share if it's like too personal or whatever. I'm just curious if you have like any idea of where God's calling you in that way.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have a plan. Whether or not
Okay.
my plan comes to fruition is up to the Lord. And things are a little up in the air right now because the church is figuring out, like, they have to have some meetings because they're hoping to pay me for my internship, which would be really lovely.
I was blessed to have that as well. So
Yeah. So, but it's just up in the air. It's just an unknown right now. So until things are confirmed, I probably
don't say
can't
anything.
say which church, but if it comes to the way I want it to, I'll be serving in a large young adults ministry actually.
Okay.
I was invited to consider it after I took a preaching class with some of the pastors from the church,
Okay.
which was really cool actually, because of course I've had a few people over the years, quite a few people, affirm my gifting in music, which is like an honor, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's something that's got me through lots of different difficult times, right? And helped me to push to become a better leader, right? Because people saw something in me. But to be invited to consider a church for my ability to communicate and for my ability to preach was really cool.
Yeah.
So that's my hope, and that's the current plan. And it'll be outside of the PAOC. I love the
Okay.
PAOC with my whole heart, but I think it will be good and healthy for me to experience a different denomination.
I I absolutely completely agree. I know. Take my credentials now. No.
I'll tell
Uh,
my dad.
that's fine. Um, no. Good for you. That's awesome. And I will say, like, I'm very happy that you're going to a place that isn't just affirming your gifting to music, because that's apparent already that you're already gifted in that way. So I
Mhm.
think getting a chance to do something and allow God to shine through you in a completely different way will only magnify you and set you up more for um, success. Because one of the things too that I think anybody listening to this, whether you're in ministry or not, um, is that nobody wants to be pigeonholed into one thing that they're good at.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't want to just. I don't want to just be defined because I can turn a camera on. Right? Like, and that's not who I am. Right? Like, and I
Mhm.
think you know this too. You are not any more valuable or less valuable because you're good at music or you're not good
Yeah.
at good at music. Um, but it's just, don't let people pigeonhole you into only thinking that you're good at one thing,
Mhm.
because God gives us many talents. And so this is for anybody listening. If you're really good with numbers, amazing. Be good with numbers, but don't just think that you are only good at numbers. God
Yeah.
gives you many talents. And so to hear that this ministry opportunity isn't just because you're good with music, but because you're actually good at communicating, is amazing, right? Because it
Mhm.
shows the plethora of gifts that God has given you for ministry, which I think is really amazing in that way. And so, speaking of like ministry and whatnot, so far, in your volunteering and maybe any other like internship type things you have done, what has been some of the biggest lessons that you have learned in ministry via like what's been one of your biggest successes and maybe what's been one of your biggest challenges
Sure.
in that way?
Um, okay, well, some things that I've learned, like we've already covered, is that I don't know everything. I'm actually keenly aware of how little I do know. I feel like the further and further that I get, the more I'm like, oh, I have so much to learn. And so that's really great and really helpful. And then the other thing that comes with that is understanding that I'm not irreplaceable. This year, I stepped into the position of student body president, which is super fun and I love. And it was the beginning of the year, and I was talking to my dad, who, of course, would understand because he's the superintendent, right? So he oversees lots of different people and lots of different organizations. And I was like, Dad, I'm going to burn myself out. Like, I'm so exhausted thinking about all of the things that everyone has to do for us to be successful. And he looked at me and he was like, Charis, I think you need to realize that you are not irreplaceable. And I was like, oh, that's humbling and helpful, very helpful. But like, oh, actually, my worrying about this thing isn't going to make it get done. And me asking other people if they've done the thing is actually really annoying. And so I just need to trust my team and trust that they are more than capable because they're all adults and they have proven to me that they're more than capable. And so that was a really helpful recent lesson for me. Yeah, and so probably my current success is my team, my student body president and the student council. Like they're phenomenal, and I don't even think I can take credit for it, but they're really a wonderful group of people to work with. Yeah.
That's, first of all, I can already tell that like you understand the mantle of leadership because the first thing you talked about was how like it was all about your team, right? Anybody that goes into leadership has to understand that like no pastor does what they do, no leader of any business, whether you're secular or not, does what they do without people behind them. And so that you already have an amazing understanding of that, it's only going to take you a lot further. And same with anybody listening, right? We don't do anything in life by ourselves. It's with everybody. So keep that in mind, which is amazing. And like I served on student council for 1 year at Bible college, or did I do 2? I don't remember. It was a long time ago at this point. And I can remember the feeling of like serving under any type of good leader makes you want to do better. And so our student body president was Pastor Victoria, a good friend of mine. And the reason that like I think that year for us was so good was because she earned the right to kind of challenge us in like a nice healthy way, of course. But like she proved time and time again that like, no, I've earned the trust of the student body and you guys. So it's like, you now have to trust me. And she let a lot of things into our hands and it made us want to do better. Right? Like, when you give somebody responsibility, it makes them want to actually live up to the responsibility. And so good for you for recognizing that because, too many people go into ministry thinking they can do it all by themselves. That is just furthest from the truth. And, take it from somebody who did burn themselves out very early on in ministry thinking I could do it all by myself. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
And as a student right now, right, you can't do it all by yourself, right?
Yeah, it's impossible.
So I'm glad that you've learned that lesson because, I wish that 21-year-old Logan had learned that lesson at 21 and not, 25. So
well, sometimes I wonder if I'm just gonna have to relearn a few lessons, but hopefully this one sticks.
You will. Evidently, we all have to. We're all on a path of learning all the time. Excuse me, which is really good. So now I have to ask, as a Bible college student, what is something that you see that the older generation is misunderstanding about this current generation? Because there is a very clear difference in the way that God is moving through this current generation than God moved previously. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's very intentional. And so a lot of the time what I hear from young leaders like yourself or even students in high school in my youth group, like they are deeply misunderstood. And I'm wondering how we can help bridge that.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's a narrative around Gen Z that they're, addicted to their phones and addicted to TikTok, and they don't know how to interact with one another, and they don't really care about anything, and they're just anxiety ridden, identityless individuals, if you will. And some of that is really true. Some of that, there's more than enough evidence to support those claims. But I think there's this idea that Gen Z hates the church or is, uninterested in the church, and I don't think that's true. I think that there is actually a very deep and real hunger for the things of the spiritual, right? And you can kind of see that as people are, really getting into things like tarot cards and crystals and whatever else, a very new age spirituality, right? There is a longing for more because they have been told that they have everything in the whole universe basically at their fingertips on one of these little cell phones, right? And they're unhappy, and they know that they're unhappy, and there's a lack of authenticity to social media and to that part of life. And so I think there's a deep longing for something that is authentic and something that is real, something that they can put their anchor against, right? Because they're told that nothing is true and they can just think whatever they want, but there is a longing for a solid foundation. And I don't think that we're going to actually reach Gen Z in the churches, like a concert kind of church, where we come and we sit and we watch.
So how do you so what approach would you take then?
This is
it's a big question, I know. So you don't have to go into it necessarily if you don't have all the answers, because I do actually agree with a lot of what you're saying. As somebody who is literally exactly on the line of being a millennial or a Gen Z, literally 97 is the year where they just don't know. So I call myself a Gen Zennial because I grew up with a millennial mentality, but I also grew up with cell phones and everything. So I can understand the ways of it. And so, and having to getting to work with Gen Z all the time now, even Gen Alpha now with some of the younger kids and everything. I see that exact hunger, that exact longing. And man, you really do have a good way of communicating, because I think you said it best when you said they have everything they want at their fingertips, but they're still longing for more. I've never heard anybody put it like that, but it's powerful. Very, very powerful. And I don't have a solution either. So that's why I'm asking, because maybe somebody younger than me who is in Bible college and knows everything probably has the right answer. But did you see the revival that was happening last year? There's the Asbury revival of a Gen Z that was going crazy, and you see things like Passion 2025, right? It's all these young people, Gen Z specifically, coming together. There's tens of thousands of people at that conference, and they're giving their lives to Jesus. And it's there is something happening with this generation. And I think a lot of times people are wanting to turn a blind eye to it because it's not how they think it should happen.
Yeah. And every revival's been like that, right? If you look at the Pentecostal revival, everyone was like, you guys are lunatics.
That's true.
And sinners and heretics, right? And so they've, of course, taken back some of those claims as the Pentecostal church has become what it is today. But the Lord continues to work in really interesting ways. For me, and I feel like I can only speak from my own experience, but what makes Scripture and the church alive to me is actually things like liturgy and things that are sacramental or physical, right? things like the Eucharist, or we call it communion, right? Or baptism, and these physical acts and the slowing down, right? Where I don't need to come to church to be entertained, right? I need to come to church for community and to be in person with people and touch them and shake their hands and be seen, right? And so serving also is huge for my own journey. And maybe that's because I'm a pastor's kid, but I think also it's because we're called to serve, and serving shapes you, right? And it's a physical thing where you feel like you're actually doing something, you're actually maybe making a difference. So I'm all for everybody serving in some capacity.
I love that you think like that, because for me, surprisingly enough, I didn't really grow up in a religious home, but if we did call it that, we were super Anglican. Like my great grandparents immigrated from like the Church of England. Like they were leaders in the Church of England and then came over. So like our entire like mom's side of the family is like Anglican Church of England. So like growing up, that was like kind of drilled into like my aunt's heads, right? Of like, and my mom, of like Anglican confirmation, like all of that. And so from a very young age myself, I remember going to like a tiny little country church with my grandparents, and the physical act of like getting communion, even at the age of like 6 years old, I can remember, because it's physical, because you can touch it, you can taste it, you can interact with it. And so for me, out of all of those sacraments, for me, it's baptism. For some reason, baptism just has a way of like igniting something like inside me. Like there is no greater joy that I get as like a pastor of any capacity than baptism. And of course, salvation and, you know, filled with the Holy Spirit and all those things are great. But when it comes to like my personal like rejuvenation, it's baptism, because it's physical, and it's something that everybody in the church gets to celebrate together. And I think for me, that is like really massive. And so I'm really happy that you feel, you know, similar in that way. And I bet you if you talk to a lot of other Christians, they would probably have something physical like that, you know, as well. So I think that's really special. Thank you for sharing that, because it's just really special. Now I have to ask, because I was in Bible college when I did my first baptism. Have you had the opportunity to baptize anybody yet? And you can say no, and it's not a competition thing. I'm just curious.
I have not. And part of that could just be the places that I'm serving in, right? Like I don't serve in youth or kids ministry. And so I mainly serve right now on the worship team. One of my very dear friends got baptized actually last year. Nice. And even though I wasn't in the water, I'd gotten my wisdom teeth out 2 days prior to this. And so I had to go to church, and I was on some medicine from the doctor. And I was like chipmunk cheeked, and it was a rough day for me. I will say that. But he got baptized, and I was over the moon. And so no, I haven't had the pleasure of baptizing, but that one I felt like I may as well have been in the tank, because I had walked the journey with that friend, right? And so it was just really special.
Yeah. I that almost sounded egotistical the way I said it. And I hope people understand that isn't the case. I just know that like I was 21, I was Charis's age when I was given the opportunity to do that. So that's why I asked, because there's this idea that, I want to just say this right now. You don't have to be a pastor to baptize somebody. Jesus and John weren't pastors, and they baptized lots of people. Same with the disciples. So like, get that out of your head. So like anybody that's thinking that, stop. No, okay, I have to ask, because we'll get into some fun stuff now, because I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We both went to Horizon at very different eras, mind you, right? Of like, I was the first full 4-year degree person, like my class, sorry, was the first 4-year people to do the competency-based like education. Yeah, that was our class. They had done 3-year programs, but we were the first full 4-year degree graduates of it. And so if anybody that doesn't know what competency-based education is, it's the only way I would have a college degree, like genuinely, because I am terrible at school. Instead of getting like an A or a B or a C or whatever, instead of just proving that you kind of know the information, you have to prove that you actually are competent in the information. So it's not just proving you can regurgitate information, but more proving you actually understand said information. You can redo your work and submit until you are proven competent. And so I have to ask, how how is your college experience been at Horizon with that? Because I think it's amazingly unique, and I want so many more places to switch to that.
Mhm. I love competency-based education. Honestly, it's wonderful. And I'm very fortunate that like academics have come fairly easily to me, which is just gifting and
Yeah.
not actually indicative of education
No.
necessarily. But I'm very grateful for that. And have been classes like communication skills with Bellamy. I took communication skills and English Christian literature with her at the same time.
You're crazy.
It was intense. Changed my life. That was my second year when I thought I knew everything.
Oh,
Like changed
oh,
my life.
oh, Charis, you're just echoing me. Like that was literally my exact college experience. I didn't get to take Christian literature. They didn't offer it back then, which I'm sad about because I wanted to.
Hmm.
But I've told this story on the podcast before. I think that class changed everything about me. Like everything about who I am changed because of that class. And so like I am trying to get Mrs. Bellamy on the podcast. I've like reached out to her. She hasn't answered because it's probably just isn't much of her thing. But if she hears this, please would love to have you on. But sorry, I just can't believe that another person has had like this same experience. Except you didn't fail it. I actually failed.
Oh.
I failed communication skills the first time, in the sense that like I had a bunch of other things going on at the time. I was RA, and it was the one and only time they said that we had to clean the bathrooms. The one and only time. This is back when they had dorm, and it was just awful. And I failed that class, and in competency based, you don't fail it; you just have to retake it a year later. Yeah, and I took it a year later and realized I don't know everything, and I actually allowed her to like teach me things and learn. And now it's like I had the same. I don't know if you have this, and I have to ask: is it that you maybe necessarily don't think it's not that you necessarily think you know everything, but you don't think it's applicable? Or maybe it's not, and you just thought you know everything. And if that's the case, that's fine. But for me, the reason I struggled so hard with it was because I was like, this isn't actually going to help me in my day to day. How does this make me a better pastor? It doesn't. But it clearly does.
I think I thought I knew everything in a different way. See, for
Yeah.
me, it was like I was learning so much at school, right? So I'm learning in communication skills about the value of story, and I'm learning in English Christian literature about like the history of art and literature in the church and
Mm.
and I'm like grieving the loss of art in the church. And so for me, it was actually like, oh, my church needs to change. And I need to change it. And like
Okay.
we need to have, books, and we should do studies, and we should look at art and see how we can use art to further the gospel, because this is how the gospel has been furthered and touches people's hearts in a different way, right? Like story or like visual art or music, like it kind of bypasses the part of your brain that goes, is 2 plus 2 actually 4? And it's
Yep.
more, and it touches your soul in a deeper, very intimate way that shapes you. And I was like, well, we have the most beautiful story there is to tell. And so people are going to be drawn to things that are beautiful. We may as well make the gospel beautiful, because they're going to go looking for beautiful things elsewhere. And anyway, so that's how I was like, oh, I know everything now. Now that I've taken school, I'm going to fix the church. But those are still hobby horses of mine, for sure, is the place of art and literature. And I can see it in my own life. Like my favorite trilogy is one that's based on the Christian faith. And it was my favorite before I even graduated high school. And those books have helped to shape me into who I am. And I think about them even in life as I'm going about my day, even though they're not scripture, there's still truth to be found in the story, right?
Absolutely. Like, thank you for sharing, because that's incredible. And I think a lot of young people, even younger than ourselves, can relate to that. I think that's so special. I had Ashley on, actually, like, I don't know, a year ago, and we talked about creativity. That was like the big thing that we talked about, because she's a very creative person, I'm a very creative person, and we just started talking about like the lack of creativity in the church, so to speak, and how like we've kind of lost it. And it's great to hear that, you know, it's kind of making a revival, in the sense of like, even if it's just one person at a time,
Yeah.
it's very special in that way. And so I think that's incredible. And so, just for reference to you guys, communication skills is, at one point, probably it was the hardest course I ever took in all of my 20 years of being in education. Not because the work itself is so extremely hard or like tedious. It's just that it's honestly less of a communications class and more of a critical thinking, at least the way I took it. It's less about understanding like even how to communicate, but why you're communicating and how you're communicating. Because what it comes from the heart. That's the easy part. You understand what you want to communicate. It's how do you do it effectively. And once I got that through my thick male skull, everything became a lot easier in that way. And so that oftentimes now, like, I ask that question to myself all the time. And I think everybody listening to this podcast should ask them that question of like, why am I communicating the way that I am? Because it might, and it could be, why are you communicating the way you are with God? It might reveal to you something that you maybe could improve on, right? Because our relationship with God is a relationship like anything else. You have to put work into it, and if you don't, you're not going to get the satisfaction from it that you need. And part of that is learning to communicate properly with God. And that sounds so like pastoral and write-off-ish, but it's true. So
yeah, definitely one of the best classes for sure. That one, English Christian Lit, History of the Christian Era, and honestly, this Tech and Communications class might turn out to be up there. I took Worship in the Arts as well with Dale Dirksen, and that was really wonderful. So lots of critical thinking. That's the best part, I think, about Bible college. Is, I mean, in some ways they teach you what to think, in that they teach you orthodox theology,
of course.
right? But within that, there's lots of people who disagree, and it's all within what is considered orthodoxy or acceptable by the church. But they teach you to think critically, right? Instead of high school where they're like, this is how you do this thing, right? But it's taking what everything around you tells you and discerning what is real and what is true and what is good. But anyway.
And I think we'll do something fun after this, because Bible college was less about learning the Bible for me and more about learning how to learn. Of course, I learned the Bible and I learned important contextual things and historical facts, and I learned how to study the Bible and just preach it and teach it. But Bible college, and I think honestly any higher level education, whether you're going to be a teacher or you're going to get your real estate license, like whatever you're going to do, those courses are not designed necessarily to teach you just the content. They're designed to make you a better learner, because no matter what profession you go into, you will always be evolving. You will always be learning. And if you don't have the tools on how to do that, you won't succeed. And that is just a fact for ministry. Doesn't matter what level of ministry you go into, you will constantly be on a path of learning, like always. And so, like, for me, that is really important. And that is what Bible college was really good at for me, was humbling, but also it taught me how to be a better learner. And for that, I'm like actually like eternally grateful, because without it, I would be a very, very different person. So if you're listening to this thinking, contemplating Bible college or some level of higher education, do it. First of all, pray about it and just try it. But don't go in with the expectation that you're going to learn everything. Go in with the expectation that you're going to learn how to learn everything.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my little plug for for it in that way. And I'll leave you with a Dr. Gabriel little tidbit of wisdom that he gave us. He came in one day to class and he had like a bunch of books, as he always does, and he like slammed them down on like the podium to like be, you know, dramatic. Yeah, thank you. And it was like an upper year course for sure. And a bunch of us are complaining because we don't know where we're going to go for internships. Like none of us had really anything figured out. Mm-hmm. And he's tired of just hearing us whine and complain. So he comes and he slams the books down and he's like, I'm tired of you whiny babies sitting here complaining that you don't know what you're going to do. He's like, how about you get off your butts and you go and try something? And he's like, yeah, it might not be the thing you want to do, but at least then you're doing something. He's like, don't just sit around and wait for God to give you that magical burning bush moment, because he's like, God can and will work in your life that way. But he's like, it's also on you. The onus is on you to get out and try something. And that's always what I tell any student or young adult or anything. Like, just try it. What harm are you doing to yourself by just trying it? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Actually, I think I remember you saying that to me. I think I remember you saying something about, you know, God can't move you if you don't like.
Probably.
You have to walk, you know, then he can guide you a whole lot easier than if you're standing still.
Oh, ugh, I'm running out of material. I need some new anecdotes. No. Okay, first of all, thank you for coming on. Now, I have to ask this because I try to, we do two different types of podcasts. We do like regular Forgiven and then Forgiven Next Gen. This is definitely a Next Gen episode because we very much focused on that type of stuff. The Next Gen is supposed to be a little more lightheaded, a little more fun. And so I have to ask, what has been like your go-to like worship song / like playlist / like band as of late? Right, it's just got to be that one song that just keeps coming up.
I've been singing "Worthy" by Chris Brown a lot lately, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's Pastor Ethan's fault because he introduced me to it. I just really love the bridge, and the flow between the bridge and the chorus is so fun. So worship leading wise, I've been singing that one a lot.
Okay, I have to ask, what's the worst song to lead worship to? Like, it's just like, it's powerful, but you're like, oh no, this one's hard. Like, you know, something.
I don't have as much of an issue with hard. Sometimes there are songs that have like a really large like range. I can't even think of the one that I'm trying to think of for that. But the one that I don't like leading, just because I find it difficult to harmonize to and kind of boring, musically boring, not lyrically. Sure. Lyrically, it's very solid, is Waymaker. I really struggle when I'm asked to lead Waymaker.
Okay. I say this in all love. I'm so tired of that song because for a month straight, we played that song while I was the music director at the neighborhood. We played that song every service for a month straight. And that was like, Pastor John told us, like, we are playing this song every service for a month straight. And the heart behind it was it was a week of prayer and fasting, and he wanted to kick it off with the idea that like God is the way maker, the miracle worker. Amazing message, absolutely powerful, and literally saw God move in my life through that week and through that month, 100%. But I kid you not, I was so done with that song at the end of the month. I was like, I legit took it out of my Spotify playlist as I was like, I don't want to listen to this for like a long time.
Yeah.
So
I actually still have to I have to humble myself. Like somebody will start singing it and I'll be like, ugh, and then I have to be like, no, it's for Jesus. It's not for me, you know? But
that's fair. That's fair.
I remember the first time Waymaker was played at the church and I went, I don't like this song. Like just musically, like I just don't, I really hope it doesn't stick. And then we did it all the time. And I was like, Lord, you work in mysterious and powerful ways. And I'm not having a good time.
That week, again, changed my life in many ways. Just prayerfully and everything. So very powerful song. So I look back on that time. I say that jokingly. I'm very happy that we did it for a month because I saw many lives changed because of that song. But it's just, I was just like, I need a break. I was like, I can't. Nope.
Yeah.
Okay. I always like, So the song that like has been like really like, I have two answers for the worshipful one. So the upbeat song, because this is kind of like those praisey songs, you know, that are a little
Yeah.
more excited and whatnot. For me, I still love King of My Heart. It is just for some reason,
Mm.
it's one of my favorite songs. It's like one of the few songs that like I know every single word by heart. I've even like played like I don't play instruments, but I can play the drums like just the littlest bit, and that's like the one song I can like play really really well. And so like I had to say King of My Heart for like that upbeat, more fun one. And even then, it's not that upbeat.
It's
And
not, but that's okay.
I forget I'm talking to a music theory. No, but the one that's been like really like hitting home is Same God. I don't know if you know that one, but
Oh, yeah, that was kind of hard, like musically, but I like it.
worship leaders, there are two of my youth leaders. They led worship yesterday and they did that song. I was in my media room directing and I got goosebumps. So I
Yeah.
was like, not just, I got goosebumps because I was very proud of the two of them because obviously like they're my youth leaders. They're kind of like my kids in some way, you know? So it's like, it's cool to see young people out there and doing it. But I was more
Mhm.
moved by like, and I've heard that song many times, but it sticks out to me
Yeah.
in that way. Okay. Secular music. Come on. Let's not pretend that we don't. Maybe I'm completely off the mark on this, but you already admitted to listening to Taylor Swift, so I know that there is non-Christian music that you necessarily listen to, and it's not. You don't have to out it, and I don't mean to turn it into a big thing, but it's
No.
like there are musicians out there who don't create worship music that create really good Christian influenced music,
Hmm.
and so like I always ask somebody if they have something like that.
Yeah. Um, well, I have a few. So, like for non-worship, still Christian artists, if you
Yeah.
will, I really like Joel Ansett, actually.
Okay.
He's got lots of really great songs. I like his song Cluttered Soul and Dwelling Place. And I've been listening to his song Sugarcoat like on repeat. Um,
Okay.
so I really like it. And then actually for like an oldie but a goodie, I have to say DC Talk. I listened to DC Talk yesterday with Noah.
Okay.
Um,
Nothing wrong with that.
no, it's a good time. It actually always reminds me of my dad. But for secular artists, actually, I like some of JP Sax's songs. I like his sound. It's very laid back. Or
Mhm.
um, Noah Kahan has a song called Orange Juice that I really like.
Okay.
Um, and then my cousin just introduced me to this artist called Wilder Woods. So I'm still like kind of getting to know that artist, but there are a few songs of his that I enjoy as well.
That's great. Mine's very simple, and it's just an artist, and I legit have this person on repeat almost all the time. Anything by Connor Price,
Oh.
anything that guy does, I just love. I love. I'm not even like super into rap. Like I'll listen to it, but for some reason, his music is just like I just love that it's so like heartfelt but fun and like and he literally did a collab with Maverick City, which you know
Oh, I heard about that.
we could talk about Maverick City later, but I don't know for that and like of course like Forrest Frank as a youth pastor, it's like a given that you have to like listen to some of his music because it's all like upbeat and whatever you just whatever throw it on in the background
Hmm.
and everything. So I would say that that's like my artist in that way. But I'll leave you with this. Is there anything else that you would want to leave with the audience on anything that we've talked about today? Maybe there's a question you want to ask me. I don't know, but I always like to end with just giving you the opportunity to say anything that you might have left on your heart for the people.
Sure. One thing before I do that, you might like an artist called Dax.
Yeah,
Um,
I do listen to Dax. He's on
yeah.
my
You were talking about Connor Price, and I was like, I wonder if he's listening to Dax.
absolute.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. His
Oh,
music videos are great.
I've never seen his music videos. Maybe I'll have to.
They're very powerful.
Okay. Hmm.
They're very bold. I'll say that.
I believe that. Some of his lyrics are pretty
yeah,
bold.
yeah. We get the vibe we're throwing down right now. He's very opinionated, and yeah.
Yeah, I only know a few of his songs, so I feel like I can't fully endorse until I know his discography a little more.
Fair
But
enough. Yeah.
um, Yeah, I guess what I'll say is that we're a new generation of leaders, and we have so much to learn from the older generations. And I think that before we try and reinvent the wheel, it's really valuable for us to actually look back and learn from those who've gone before us, and not just those who are still alive, but actually those who have gone before us, way before us, because we are the church, and we're the same church in a lot of ways. We're the universal church, right? Through time and space, we all worship the same Jesus, and so yeah, be humble enough to learn, and bold enough to ask questions and make suggestions when it comes down to it.
Well said. Very well said, my friend. I have to say, it has been a pleasure. Here's the reality. The podcast is as much for the guests as it is for me, because it's just an excuse for me to catch up with people I don't get the chance to talk to on a regular basis. Like yourself. I try to make it a thing of like I do a podcast a year with Ethan, just because it's like, he and I can always talk about something.
Mm-hmm.
That's that. I'm going to pray for you and for this podcast, and then that's it. I just want to say thank you, everybody who does listen. Thank you for watching on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. I would say Google Podcast, but it doesn't exist anymore. That's basically all the platforms we're on. And that's about all I got. I'm a terrible producer when it comes to that. Thank you, Charis, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And truthfully, I would like to have you on again, because I have a really idea for a different podcast, but I won't share it now. I might ask you about it after.
Okay.
But anyway, stay tuned for that possible. Ooh, cliffhanger. That's
You're
really
such
cringe.
a youth pastor. That was all.
Oh, that was so cringe. Okay, I had to share this story because I know that this person listens and they will not be upset that I've said this. I got called the most backwards compliment ever. This student is like my right hand. They're awesome. And they were directing our live stream like a month or two ago. And I said some cringe joke just like I did right there. And she just turns around and they just look at me and they're just like, "You're such a youth pastor." Like, it's like, you're just, I just burst out laughing. So I'm glad that you have affirmed that for me as well.
Yeah. Hey, you have a calling on your life there, Logan.
Thanks. Okay.
Genuinely, you do. That was.
I know. I take it. Thank you. I take that. Okay. Well, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for each and every person that will listen to this. Thank you for Charis. Thank you for the wisdom and discernment, that she brought to this podcast. Thank you for her willingness to share her heart, her struggles, her passions. Father, thank you. Just thank you for the young leader that you are turning this person into. Father, I'm very excited to see how she impacts the kingdom. Father, and I pray that our words can seek into the hearts of those listening. Father, if there are people listening to this who have contemplated Bible college, who have felt a twinge of ministry on their life, Father, I pray that Charis's words in this podcast can help push them in that right direction. And we pray for Charis and the rest of her schoolwork as she graduates in a year or so and goes on to do her internship and gets to experience more of who you are and what ministry is. Father, I pray that you bless her in that way and you bless those people listening. And we pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.